bored, bored, bored. I suppose I could clean out the shed. Nah, too hard. Think I'll make something instead. G'day Knuckleheads, Uncle Knackers here. Now today's project is going to be one of the easiest builds I've ever done. And let's face it, I've done some pretty simple ones in the past. And here it is, a floating shelf out of an old pallet board with an adjustable bookend. Ooh la la, very fancy. Now the first thing I'm going to do is cut my shelf to length, and mine's going to be about 1 metre long, which is about 39¼ inches. And now all I'm going to do is add a trim to both ends of the shelf and to the front of the shelf. And for the trim, I'm just cutting down this old fence paling into widths of 60mm, which I think is about 2 3/8 inches, something like that. But just remember, this is a pallet wood project, so there's always a bit of give and take with the measurements. With the strips now done, it's time to cut these to length with a 45° miter cut. It's now time to attach the trim to the pallet board, and if you don't have a vise to hold the pallet board in place, just nail or screw a couple of cleats onto your workbench and that should do the trick. And here's the shelf, basically all done. Now all we need to do is to cut a support that's going to sit underneath this edge here and up against the wall. And that's going to help create the illusion that the shelf is floating in midair. Ooh, tricky. Now here's the piece of timber that I just cut for our support. And that'll be screwed directly to the wall, and the shelf simply sits on top of that support, just like that. This is the wall side, and this is the front of the shelf. Too easy. And now for the sliding bookends, and to make those, I'm just going to cut 2 blocks out of this old hardwood 4x4 fence post. It should look good. Now to enable these bookends to slide backwards and forwards, we need to cut a slot into the top of that shelf to accommodate one of these bolts. And I'm cutting that slot with a jigsaw, but you could use a router or even a circular saw. And here's the slot all cut out. I think it turned out pretty well, and the bolt just simply goes in there like that and slides up and down. I like it. It's now time to attach these bookends. Now this side here is going to be fixed, so I'm going to insert a few screws from underneath to hold that in place. But this side here is going to be able to slide backwards and forwards. So I need to drill a hole in the top of that to accommodate this bolt. And there you have it. Bolt goes in nicely. Now just give it a couple of firm taps to make sure that it sits nice and flat. I like it. And to attach the stationary bookend, I've got it sitting in the right spot now. I'll put a couple of nails in it from underneath, then turn it over and insert a couple of screws. Now with the bookend that slides, you'll need to lock it in place with a nut. Now that might get a bit tricky and a bit awkward. So what I thought I'd do is make a bigger nut out of this old piece of 4x4. I've drawn a design on the face there. I'll cut that out and then drop in this nut like that, and hopefully that works. Let's give it a crack. So here's the big wooden nut, and I've drilled a hole into the centre, not all the way through, but almost all the way through. And then I've traced around this nut onto that surface just there. I'll chisel that out and have this set in to that nut just flush with the surface. And so here's the metal nut inside the wooden nut, and you can see it's nice and flush with the surface. And I held the nut in place with a dab of glue. And now all we need to do is to screw this onto that bolt, just like that. Too easy. And the big nut makes the job of screwing it on and screwing it off an absolute breeze. I like it. All right, up to the last stage, and that's to put 2 coats of clear satin varnish over the whole lot. And here it is, all varnished up. And I reckon it turned out absolutely fantastic. And you'll also notice how I've painted the top of those bolts yellow, just for a bit of added contrast. And there's the adjusting nut underneath. All right, it's now time to duck inside and screw that shelf support to the wall. All right. The shelf support is now attached to the wall, and it's really important to get at least 1 screw into 2 different studs, otherwise it may come down. Now if you're having trouble finding a stud, I made a video on a really tricky method of how to find one. Make sure you check it out. I'll leave a link in the description box down below. Alright, this is nice and level, so it's now time to attach the shelf. And to do that, all you have to do is place the shelf on top of the shelf support and screw into it. Too easy. Great tip, knackers! So there it is, my easy to build pallet wood floating shelf with adjustable bookends. How cool is that? Well, I hope you enjoyed and found that video useful. And if this is your first time to my channel, welcome, and please hit that subscribe button. And don't forget to give the video the old thumbs up. That's always greatly appreciated. And while you're here, check out my Facebook page at DIY For Knuckleheads. The link's in the description box below. Now, don't go just yet. There'll be a few photos going backwards and forwards of the finished product. All right, I think it's time for a cup of tea. So till next time, I'm out of here. Cheers.